for your kind attention. Om Jnana Timirandasya Ganam Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Vishwade Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prasarine Nirdishesha Shunyavadi Paschate Shattarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Shivashari Gauravakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So yesterday we spoke about the first part of Bhagavad Gita being basically karma yoga. There are two types of karma yoga. Regular karma yoga, which means I do something and I get the result. Pious or impious, whatever I do. Of course, karma yoga, generally speaking, means that one follows the Shastra and basically performs pious activities. But those pious activities are also not free from the samsara, or the cycle of birth and death. Pious activities oblige us to come back to this world and perform more pious activities, or to get the results of those pious activities. As Krishna says, Yamimam Pushpatam Bacham Prabhadan Yavipashitaha Vedavadaratha Anyadasti. That the persons who perform these pious activities generally come up manam swargapara. They're looking for a heavenly situation, looking for heavenly goals. But the type of karma yoga that Krishna is teaching is called niskama karma yoga, which means it is karma yoga, but the major portion of it is actually bhakti. The difference is bhakti descends from Krishna. Just like if one listens to Bhagavad Gita and follows it faithfully, then that's bhakti. Especially if one understands the ultimate goal of which we'll discuss tomorrow. But, or one follows the Guru, or the Vaishnavas, or the Sadhus. Of course, sadhus means one who is actually qualified to be a sadhu. Our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, said when he was young, he became a little doubtful about the sadhus, because there was one man who lived in front of their house, and every day he would go out dressed as a sadhu. For a few hours he would come back and change, after he collected, then change into his regular clothes and go out and enjoy life. So, not that kind of sadhu, but a sadhu sadhu means sat, one who dedicates oneself. So it is recommended in Shastras, satam prasangam mama virya samvido, that one should associate with those sadhus, especially who are always engaged in glorifying the Supreme. So, if one follows and takes advice from such a sadhu, then that's called bhakti. But when one dedicates everything without personal gain to the Supreme, but according to one's nature and according to one's particular orientation, that is called niskama karma yoga. So the first 6 chapters, yesterday we spoke about the first 4 chapters. And of course, if I want to finish this brief analysis of Bhagavad Gita, I can't go into so much detail as I realized yesterday. So in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the 4th chapter, of course, as we said yesterday, ends with the basic instruction that one should accept a spiritual master, upadekshati jnanam, one who understands the absolute truth and is full of transcendental knowledge. And one should surrender to such a person. Then Krishna goes into the 5th chapter. The 5th chapter is very similar to the 3rd chapter. the third chapter speaks about karma yoga, and the fifth chapter emphasizes karma yoga, meaning again, niskama karma yoga, dedicating everything to the Supreme. Krishna spoke about that in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Karmanjivadikaraste, that one should do everything with a sense of duty, not just not doing whimsically, but with a sense of duty, understanding what is my duty in life. And of course, tomorrow we will discuss that. What is that ultimate duty? What is that duty which includes all other duties? So the fifth chapter, Krishna deals specifically with clearing up Arjuna's doubt. And interestingly, Krishna caused the doubt to, by his last two verses in the fourth chapter, he says, so you should be renounced and you should work. So then Arjuna says again what he said at the beginning of the third chapter. I'm confused, Krishna. Do you want me to work or do you want me to renounce? And then Krishna again emphasizes, you have to understand that working for the Supreme is the supreme renunciation. And so some key elements in that particular chapter, Krishna says one should work with a transcendental vision. Vidya Vinaya Sambhade, Brahmani Gavi Hashtati. One should see the Brahman, the cow, the elephant, Shune Chaiva Sopake Cha, the dog and the dog eater, all the same, Pandita Sambhadarshina. Otherwise, one should see them all in their real identity as spirit souls, not how they are identified with this world. When we see people in terms of how they are identified with this world, then we get anger, frustration, envy, and so many things. But if we see on the spiritual platform, which of course Krishna recommends in the sixth chapter of Jnana Yoga, sixth chapter deals with the Ashtanga Yoga, the eightfold process of yoga, which in most cases nowadays there are many yoga societies and they teach yoga, but they don't teach Ashtanga Yoga. They generally teach Hatha Yoga and Pranayama. Exercises, which are good. They're good for health. They're good for mental stability. But they're simply 2 out of 8 processes. The first two, Nama, Yama, Niyama, which Krishna discusses in the Yoga Ladder, how one ascends through the process of yoga in the 6th chapter. At the end of the 5th chapter, Krishna gives what is Srila Prabhupada, spiritual master, designated as the peace formula. Bhoktaram Jagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suriram Sarvabhutana. That 3 things, if you want to be peaceful in this world. First, Bhoktaram Jagatapasam. Everything should be offered to the Supreme, because everything we do is an expenditure of energy. So that means we have to offer that energy to some goal, some achievement. So Krishna says, I'm the ultimate goal of all sacrifices. Because everything you do is a sacrifice. It's not that yajna, sacrifice just means sitting in front of Agnihotra, sitting in front of a fire, putting in ghee. It means everything you do is a yajna. And therefore everything you do in life is bhajan. It should be bhajan. It should be an offering to the Supreme. And then he says, Sarvaloka Maheshwara. And why? Because everything belongs to me. I am the supreme controller and owner of everything. And also, I am the best friend of every living entity. The best friend means that Krishna is living within the heart of every one of us as Paramatma, the supreme soul. And he's trying to guide us all through conscience back to him. Otherwise, even the most sinful or deviant or disgusting persons, they have love for someone. They have affection for someone. Family member, someone they have affection, or their dog, or their parrot, whatever. They have affection for someone. So that affection, that friendship, Krishna is so kind that he remains in the heart of every living entity. Even those who deny his existence, even those who ignore him, he's always there. Therefore, that is the best friend. The best friend is one, as I explained yesterday, Suhrit, who always has a heartfelt desire to help his other friend. So then Krishna in the 6th chapter, he begins the 6th chapter because yoga, the purpose of yoga, the first step in yoga, yama niyama, follow rules and regulations, follow different disciplines. These disciplines, which Krishna spoke about briefly in the 2nd chapter, the disciplines means the regulative principles of freedom. To be free from something, just like so many countries, Trinidad, USA, so many parts of Africa, India, at one point they were conquered, they were colonized. And then they fought or they strove for freedom, which requires an effort. So also to be free from those senses that are pulling us away from the real purpose of life and engaging us in frivolous activities and superfluous activities. These principles of yoga are meant to keep us focused on the real purpose of life. So Krishna begins by saying, Bandhar Atmanas Tasya, that the mind should be one's best friend. Yenat Mana Jitaha. When one has conquered the mind, it's one's best friend. But anatmanas tu shatrupe. But if one cannot conquer the mind, then the mind yenat maiva shatruva becomes one's worst enemy. So we have to, the yoga process means to overcome the attachment of the mind to the dictations of the senses, to attach the mind to purified intelligence. And then Krishna explains that process. And he explains it in such a way that Arjuna is seeing it very difficult. You have to sit like this, even not even in this position, but in the Padmasana asana. And then you concentrate the mind, you give up all desires, you're free from sex life. So Arjuna, after he hears this whole process of yoga, he says, my dear Lord, Chanchalam Himana Krishna. Krishna, the mind seems to me to be very, very fickle. And Pramati, it is very agitating. Bhagavat, very strong, and Dridham, very obstinate. So I don't think I can follow this process. And then Krishna says, Krishna explains to him more to encourage him. And ultimately at the end of the 6th chapter, after explaining to Arjuna, even if a yogi is not fully successful, if he's on proper path of yoga, especially bhakti yoga, that he will have success. He will be born, if he has a little bit of advancement, he'll be born in an aristocratic family, so that in that birth, he doesn't have to worry about working very hard to support his elders because they're wealthy. Or if he's more dedicated, then he'll be born in a Brahminical, in a Sattvic family. And if he's more advanced, if he's almost achieved success, he will be born in the family of transcendentalists, which is a rare birth, but a very special birth. But still one has to take advantage of it. So, then Krishna says at the very end of that chapter, Yoginam api sarvasham. But the best of all yogis, Madgatinantara, is that yogi who has me situated always is situated with me within the heart. Otherwise, that person who is always following me. And then Krishna goes into the 7th chapter. The 7th chapter, as I explained briefly yesterday, through the 12th chapter, is the essence of Bhagavad Gita, just like a sandwich. You have 2 pieces of bread, and the best part is in the middle. So also, Krishna has designed the Bhagavad Gita. Karma in the beginning, Jnana in the end, and in the middle, the best part, Bhakti. But that best part is also being most valuable. It also is the most costly, meaning that one has to learn how to surrender. So Krishna begins the 7th chapter, and of course now at the end of the 6th chapter, Krishna begins to reveal that he is that absolute truth, but he doesn't declare it. But in the beginning of the 7th chapter, he begins to state more directly, Maya Saktamana Partha. Arjuna, you should attach your mind to me. So he begins to refer to himself. And then in the 7th verse, Matta Paratanam Nanya Kinchadasti Dananujaya, that I am that supreme absolute truth. Maya Savidam Protam Sutre Manigana Iva. That just like pearls are strung on a thread, this whole existence rests on me. I am the Avyakta Moolam. I am the hidden root of all existence. Hidden doesn't mean that we can't see Krishna. It means that most people don't understand him. And he will explain why a little later on. So then Krishna goes into something very interesting. He tells us as beginners, how can we understand him? Rasoham apsukonteya. First of all, I'm the taste of water. Everybody drinks water. Except for maybe there's a few yogis who live on air. But, except for those few yogis hidden away somewhere in the Himalayas, most of us drink water. And so he says, I'm the taste of that water. And then he goes through a whole series of things that what he is. Even that most precious thing to the conditioned living entities. He says, Dharma vidruddho bhuteshu kamosi bharatarshava. Even sex life, which is so sought out by practically every living entity. If it's done properly according to religious principles, I am that. I'm everything, in other words. And he goes through a few examples. And then he says that you can realize me through this way, but Mayesha Gunamaya, Daivihesha Gunamaya. But this energy, if you try to understand me through material nature, please understand this material nature is inspired by me. It controls all of you. And it's very difficult. Daivihesha Gunamaya Mama Maya Durataya. Very difficult to escape. But Mami Vaye Papadyante. But for those who surrender unto me, they can escape it easily. So then Krishna describes what kinds of people can never escape it. Foolish people. And what kinds of people, 4 kinds of people who surrender to him. And those 4 kinds are those who are in need, arti, jigyasu, those that are looking for some truth, artarti, those who are desirous of material gain, and jnani, the best of all, those who are looking for the absolute truth. They are very likely to find it. But any of these 4, unless they come to the platform of pure bhakti, which Krishna emphasizes later on in the very 7th chapter. What are the obstacles? He says that even if one follows a regulated process of trying to find me through this ascending process of yoga or ascending process of understanding, bahunam karmanamante jnanamam pampapatite, that after many, many births, they may be able to understand. Vasudeva Sarvami. that Vasudeva, me, I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But this is difficult to do, he says. It's rarely achieved. Why is it rarely achieved? Because, and this is something that I think is very important that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita in the 7th chapter. I'm going a little more into detail. He says that what are the obstacles to achieving? We have a tendency to look for a higher being that's very tangible to us. Krishna can appear to be intangible. He can appear to be very far away because he's totally transcendental. So therefore, especially the followers of the Vedas, generally speaking, it's recommended, especially 5,000 years ago and before that you worship the Devata. But Krishna says, and now remember, Bhagavad Gita is spoken at the beginning of Kali Yuga. What are the characteristics of Kali Yuga? That people are short-lived, people have memory loss, meaning that they can't remember things like before. People before, all the Brahmins were Shuddhas, meaning they can remember anything they ever were exposed to. Nowadays, sometimes we can't remember what we were doing yesterday, in detail, in most of us. So, because of the nature of Kali Yuga, Krishna doesn't recommend worshipping the Devatas, and he gives the reasons. Not that we don't respect them, not that we don't worship them within our minds as servants of the Supreme. But Krishna establishes later on in Bhagavad Gita, Aham adir hi devanam. I am the source of all these devas. Don't think that they're competing with me. And an example of that was Indra. Indra, Krishna he saw that Indra sometimes he becomes proud. Anyone in this material world is subject to pride. So sometimes he becomes proud, and therefore Krishna said to his father, you're doing some yajna. Yes, Indra yajna. He said, no, my father, let's do Govardhan yajna. Govardhan sustains all of us. This mountain, this beautiful mountain of Govardhan, which is actually an incarnation of me. He didn't say that right away, but it is. He says it gives us grass for the cows and everything we need, and water and shelter. And so finally he convinced his father, and as anyone who knows the story, most of us know that we have right here, Giri Govardhan, Govardhan Dari, the lifter of Govardhan Hill. Why did he do it? To defeat the pride of Indra. So Krishna is basically saying in Kali Yuga, people are very short-lived. They don't have time to go through the gradual elevating process of worshiping different devas to come to the supreme deva, which is Krishna. And Krishna establishes himself throughout the Bhagavad Gita as the supreme, just like we just discussed it. Again and again and again, Krishna says, to me. To me doesn't mean some obscure me. It means that beautiful supreme person. Our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, he had one godbrother, one person who was also initiated by his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he was from Germany. So he wanted to go see his Guru Maharaj. He had never met him. No. So he came to India. Of course, at that time, there was no airplanes. So he came by steamship, and he landed in Bombay. And he had to go all the way across from Bombay to Calcutta or to Mayapur, where his spiritual master was living. And so he got there, and he said, now I've actually realized how Krishna is the Supreme. Because I saw so many devas, but they're all doing something. Some of them have weapons, some of them do this, some of them do that. But I see that Krishna is simply playing the flute. And so he must be supreme. In the Upanishad it said, Tasya karyam karanam chabidite natat shamas chabikash chabishyate, that the supreme person is that person who has nothing to do. Just like we all have this idea, I'll retire and I'll do what I want. Of course, generally by the time most people retire, they can't do what they want. But that's the idea. I'll retire. I have a whole story about that, but I don't have time to tell it right now. So Krishna is the supreme retiree. But he doesn't retire because he's always eternally retired. He's eternally playing with his devotees in the spiritual realm in Goloka Vrindavan. This is the supreme person who has nothing to do and has no equal or even no good second. The closest second to Krishna, or as Krishna expands, is Vishnu in different forms. The closest one is Lord Shiva, who is the expansion of Lord Vishnu within the material energy. Shambhu. Shambhu means halo. Just like when a spaceship comes into the atmosphere, there's a red glow around that. So when the Supreme Lord enters into material energy, there is Shambhu. There is a glow, an effulgence, which means that when the Supreme Transcendent Lord, who is above all Prakriti Parama Purusha, he is beyond all Prakriti, all nature, all matter, then he, when he comes in contact with material nature, it's like milk being converted into yogurt, and that is Shiva. Krishna is like the milk. Milk can become yogurt, but yogurt cannot become milk. So anyway, that's another subject. But so Krishna, in several verses, he describes why is it that we shouldn't worship the devatas. He says, Mayaiva vihitam hitam. He says, one, by worshiping them, that tasya shradhayan yuktas, that one can get one's desires by tasya radhanam ihate. One can achieve one's desire. And labate sa tata kaman. But once achieving them, one should understand Mayaiva vihitam hitam. I was actually the one who gave that power to the Devata. In the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that Istam bhoktam hivo deva darshante jagya bhavita. That the demigods are in charge of fulfilling the wishes of the living entities. Of course, that's according to religiosity, not just any desire. But dasyante, Krishna uses this word, they are obliged to do it. But Krishna is never obliged to do it. He becomes voluntarily obliged to the love of his devotee. But the demigods are forced to do it. So there's a supremacy beyond those demigods, and that's Krishna. So Krishna is recommending we respect the demigods, but in Kali Yuga we don't have the time or the ability to worship them properly. Of course, there are many people here in Trinidad, in India, that do worship the devas, and they may get some results. Although in Kali Yuga, generally speaking, the Deva Jagya, or the worshipping the Devas, is not done properly. Because there's not enough gold, there's not enough jewels, there's not enough ingredients, which is actually required to worship them. But if one is fully dedicated, they may get some result. Although generally speaking, the result is simply the result of previous karma. Just like one man in New York, I went into his shop, Indian man, and I saw him, he had a picture of Lakshmi on his cash register. That was before electronic, old-fashioned cash register. And he offered 2 incense and put them right in a piece of tape, and between a piece of tape that taped the picture of Lakshmi. And I said, you think that will bring you wealth? Good, Lakshmi. I said, no, you're getting the results of your karma. This is not proper worship of Lakshmi. If you want, I can tell you what is proper worship and how much you'll have to spend. Probably more than you even have, just to get the ingredient. And he kind of scratched his head. I don't think he believed me. And I tried. So, this worship is not recommended by Krishna. You can do it, and you'll get some result. But you won't get the supreme result. this is what Krishna said. That those who worship the demigods, they go to the demigods. But the demigods, as Krishna says in finalizing that antavanta hipalam desham, that the fruits of that worship will be temporary. And therefore very intelligent persons, they worship me to get an eternal result. The worship of Krishna, the Supreme, is the highest. It's the highest and therefore the most difficult because it requires giving everything. Just like some people, they enjoy the company of the opposite sex. And more responsible people, they get married. Getting married means it's a greater responsibility and therefore it requires a greater sacrifice. Of course, ultimately, karmatically, it's much more pious than simply trying to enjoy the opposite sex, which has become very popular nowadays. But that's another subject. The point is, if you look for the most valuable thing, just like anyone can become a billionaire, or anyone can become a multi-billionaire. Any one of us here can do it. But how many will do it? How many will have that determination and that destiny to do so? But we can all do it. So anyone can become a pure bhakta or a pure devotee of Krishna. But how many will actually do it? How many are willing to pay the price to leave this samsara, to leave this birth and death? It's not an easy thing. Even many of those who are here, who are in the process, sometimes find so many obstacles because our mind and our senses try to drag us down back into a constant interaction with material nature. So this is a very elevated subject. And therefore, in the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna begins the analysis of bhakti. And in the middle of the beginning of the 8th chapter, he says it's very important that one understands that at the time of death, yam yam vapishparam bhavam chajantante kalevaram, that at the time of death, whatever one is thinking of, that will be one's goal. And therefore, one who thinks of me at that time, therefore, then he begins again to describe the yoga process, but in relation to him. And then he says, what is the turning point in Bhagavad Gita? A shloka which unfortunately I had forgotten, so I'm going to read it. Ananya chatta satatam yo mam shmarati nityada tasyaham sulabha bhakta nitya yuktasya yogina. Krishna says 4 times in this verse that which is in relation to me is permanent. Otherwise, when you take up the process of relating to me, then the results will be permanent. But you must be fully absorbed. Nitya sha, ananya chetasa. One must have one consciousness fully absorbed. Even in the beginning of the 8th chapter, Krishna says, Abhyasa yoga yukteina, that chetasa nanya gamina, one's consciousness cannot deviate from this final goal. So he has 4 times, one has to be fully absorbed. So this is the beginning, the first time that Krishna describes pure bhakti, pure devotion, pure dedication, full surrender. And then he goes on to describe, that if you do this, you don't have to come back to the material world. But those that are following the yoga process, they have to very carefully calculate how to get out of the samsara. But the devotee of the Lord, simply by their devotion, will automatically, they don't have to worry about the time or the moment when they have to leave this world. So, and then he wraps up the 8th chapter by saying all these things which are recommended in the Vedas, Vedishu, Jagishu, Tapasu, Chaiva, Danishu, Yat Punya, Phalam, Padishtam, all the yoga, sacrifice, austerity, penances, charity, all those things that are recommended in the Vedas can be, in one step, they can be achieved. Yogi Param Sthanam Upaiti Chadyam. And that is the highest yogi who can actually understand that this is all done in the process of bhakti, or devotional service to the Supreme Personality of God. And then Krishna goes into the most intimate chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So, before we go into that 9th chapter, we'll stop for a minute. We have one special bhajan, which is a very beautiful bhajan, and I'm going to ask the chanter to read the translation if they have it there. And then I'll just incorporate that, what I'll say about the 9th chapter. Hare Krishna.
Show Mind, body, and family, whatever may be mine, I have surrendered at your lotus feet, O youthful son of Nanda. In good fortune or in bad, in life or at death, all my difficulties have disappeared by choosing those feet of yours as my only shelter. Slay me or protect me as you wish, for you are the master of your eternal servant. If it is your will that I be born again, then may it be in the home of your devotee. May I be born again even as a worm, so long as I may remain your devotee. I have no desire to be born as a Brahma averse to you. I yearn for the company of that devotee who is completely devoid of all desire for worldly enjoyment or liberation. Father, mother, lover, son, lord, preceptor and husband, you are everything to me. Thakur Bhaktivinoda says, O Kana, please hear me. O Lord of Radha, you are my life and soul.
Hare Krishna. So this is a very beautiful bhajan, which Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of our great acharyas in our line of devotees of Krishna, has written to show the nature of bhakti. What is the highest realm of bhakti? What is the highest fruit of devotion to the Supreme Lord, which is the subject matter of the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna begins by saying, what is the entrance to this highest level of consciousness? And the entrance is, Idam tatte guyatamam pavaksham jnanasuyave. He begins the chapter by saying that one must, in order to get this guyatamam, this highest, most secret knowledge, transcendental knowledge, what is the requirement? Anasuyave. One has to be free from envy. Then, asamshayam samgam. Then one can be free from all doubts and all misgivings. Jnana Vijnana Samhita. One acquires all knowledge and all, mixing it up with another verse. One acquires all knowledge and all realization of one's real self and the Supreme Lord. And then Krishna says something very beautiful. He explains what is the nature of Bhagavad Gita, in which our spiritual master Srila Prabhupada wrote one book based on this, Raja Vidya. So he says, Raja Vidya, Raja Guyam. This Bhagavad Gita is the incarnation of Raja Vidya, the highest knowledge, Raja Guyam, the most confidential revelation of spiritual knowledge and activity, and spiritual life and spiritual nature. Bhavikam, idam uttamam. It is the most pure. Pratyakshavgamam dharanyam. It is the direct manifestation of all spirituality and religiosity. And most importantly, for all of us, susukam kartum abhyayam. It is eternally enacted in the topmost blissful state of mind and consciousness. It is the greatest bliss. It is very happily performed. So this is the nature of bhakti. It makes us happy. It makes us blissful. Now one may say, well, any of us may say, who actually practice the process, when will that bliss become fully manifest? And so Krishna goes through the 9th chapter explaining how will it become manifest. Then the next few verses in the 9th chapter, he says, well, first you have to understand who I am. I am totally transcendental to all this matter. Although I pervade matter, I am not mixed within it. And although I am within it, at the same time I'm not within it. That's a little confusing. I'm within it, I'm not within it. But what that means is that in my form of Paramatma, in my form of Brahman, I penetrate everything and every living being and every atom. But in my form of Krishna, I am eternally situated in the spiritual realm with my devotee. The Lord in the form of Mahavishnu, he rests in Yoga Nidra, or in a state of transcendental meditation upon his own transcendental self. And in that transcendental consciousness of the Lord, unlimited universes emanate effortlessly, while sleeping, while resting, while meditating. All the universe, otherwise the whole material existence, is very easily created by the Lord. There's no effort. Not like the Western concept of Atlas, where he's carrying the earth planet on his back and sweating. Not like that. No. Krishna doesn't have to sweat to create this whole existence. But at the same time, Krishna, although he does it effortlessly, he makes a great effort when he sees someone trying to dedicate their lives to him, to become and engage or enter into a constant communion with that devotee. And that is what Krishna recommends throughout the Bhagavad Gita, to meditate upon him. So then he says, but sometimes people have difficulty. Avachananti mam bhutha manushim tanam ashritaha. Because I've accepted this particular form, which appears to be human-like. People sometimes attribute to me that I have become human-like. Although he stated previously that I know everything, but very few people actually know me. But I know everyone, and I know everything. But when he appears in this form of Krishna, then sometimes it's a little difficult to understand him. Param bhavam vachanam. Therefore, most people don't understand my supreme nature. Mama bhutam maheshwaram, and how I am the proprietor of everything. So then Krishna says, those people who have that mentality, who see me as something human, something material, these persons are called mayavadis. Those who see that supreme absolute truth as a creation of maya, or the illusory energy. He says, for those people, moga sha, moga karmana, moga jnana vichatasaha. Such people, their aspirations will be bewildered, their activities will be bewildered, otherwise they're temporary and they'll be cut off. And their knowledge will also be very limited, because they've taken shelter of material consciousness. But then he says, but there are other people. No. There are other people. Mahatmanas tumam partha. The Mahatmas. Actually, all of us are Mahatmas. There wasn't just one Mahatma, Mahatma Gandhi, or some other Mahatma. No. We're all Mahatmas. We're all great souls, but our greatness is covered by material consciousness. So Krishna begins to describe who is the Mahatma. Mahatmanas tumam partha. Daivi prakriti ashritaha. That person who has taken shelter of the divine nature of the Supreme. And those persons are very special. And then he describes what are their activities. No? Satatam kirtayanto mam, always glorifying me. Yatatashtritidha, with great determination carrying out their spiritual activities, like chanting my holy name, worshipping me. No. Of course, at the end of the 9th chapter, you will describe specifically, even more specifically. Then, Namashantasya mam bhaktya. I'm sorry. Satatam kirtayantamam yatadashyudhavata namachastantamam bhakta yukta nityayuktu upasyate. They are always eternally engaged in worshiping me. And then Krishna begins to describe again persons who don't have that consciousness, but who seek heavenly pleasures. Yes, they can achieve heavenly pleasures, but shine punye martya lokam vishanti. Unfortunately, after enjoying them, they will have to come back to this material world. There was one Brahmin named Muktigada, who is described in the Mahabharata. He was such a saintly person that he gained his livelihood by collecting the grains that had fallen after the harvest. But he was so charitable that on his way home he would practically give away all those grains in charity to other saintly persons. And his family had barely enough to eat, but they were happy because he was so saintly. Because he gave them the real essence of life. So one day a chariot came from the sky and said, "Come, by your pious activities you will be elevated to the heavenly planet Swargaloka." And he said, "Please describe these planets to me." And they began to describe all these things. There's painless birth, there's no old age, there's no disease. And we said, "But is there death?" "Well, yeah, but after so many millions of years." He said, "But then it's not eternal." And no, I said, "Well, thank you. I want to understand what is eternal." All right, so they left. And he continued with his activities, glorifying the Supreme. And another chariot came, but this time he said, "Please come to Vaikuntha, the eternal abode of the Lord." He said, "All right, no problem." So Krishna says, yes, you can gain these heavenly pleasures, but they're temporary. And after you gain them, you'll have to give them up and then come back to this Martya Loka, this world of birth and death and pain and suffering, where there definitely is disease and there definitely is old age if you make it that far. So this is the material world. So then Krishna says, but this is not what I'm recommending for you. If you can fully absorb your consciousness in me and worship me, and always be in constant communion, spiritual communion with me through worship and loving devotion, then then I will give you everything you need and everything you're lacking and preserve everything that you have. And he's speaking about spiritual consciousness. Not that he's going to preserve our house or preserve our bank account. No. That's up to us. But Krishna said, I will preserve that eternal gem of spiritual consciousness within your heart once it's born. That I promise you. And then Krishna again, after that, he speaks about the danger of worshiping even great material personalities who are controllers of the universe. But he says again, that worship is actually really meant for me, but yajan yavidi purvakam. It is not done in the proper way. Otherwise, anything that anyone can give you, even the devatas, I'm giving. But if you worship someone else, then you won't get the full benefit and the highest benefit. And then Krishna begins to describe, how do we get that highest benefit? Yad karoshi rashnasi. Everything you do, everything you eat, everything you perform, every sacrifice you do, should all be done as an offering to me. But then Krishna makes it clear that I'm not favoring a particular group of people. Everyone. Samaham sagabhutana nami deshastina priyaha. That I'm equal to everyone. I don't favor anyone. But if someone follows my formula, which he gave in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, ye tamam prabhadyate tam stataiva prajamyaham, to the degree that one surrenders to me, I will reciprocate. So if you give 100%, I will give unlimited percentage. In the material world, we have 0 to 100. But in the spiritual world, we have 100 beyond 100. So I can give you beyond 100. You can only give me 100. I can give you beyond 100. So it's a good deal. No? Anyone who has business, business mind can understand. If I give something and I give more, well, that's a profit. No? So Krishna is offering that profit, and he says, if someone, ye bhajati tumam bhaktya, if one is actually dedicated to me, which is available to everyone, although not everyone takes advantage of it, maititeshu chakyam, that person will be very dear to me, and I will be very dear to them. And then he says, but and even if someone has some difficulty, because one may say, well, this all sounds very difficult, this full surrender, give up everything. Actually, Krishna never tells us to give up everything, because he says, actually, you don't have anything. In Hinduism, in Christianity, and Islam, every major scripture of the world says we come into this world with nothing and we leave with nothing. But we can leave with something. And the only way we can actually leave is through spiritual consciousness. That we can acquire, which actually we don't acquire. Nitya Siddha Krishna praying. We have that spiritual consciousness. It's just covered like a diamond that has fallen into the mud. The diamond has all its translucent qualities, but they cannot be seen because of the mud. So because this mud that is covering us, called the material existence, the gross and the subtle bodies, we can't understand our real nature. But once that nature flourishes, and once we connect ourselves with the Supreme, Krishna says, even if you make some mistakes, sagareva samantavya, even if you perform something which is considered abominable in this world, but you reestablish yourself in spiritual consciousness, then you will be considered to be a saintly person. And then Krishna goes to say, at the end of the 9th chapter, he says that if anyone is eligible in the Vedic system before the times of Bhagavad Gita, everything is very structured. Women are like this, men are like this, Brahmins are like this, Kshatriyas are like this. Very structured, very, very structured. And so, but Krishna says at the end of the 9th chapter, everyone, women, Shudras, Brahmabandhus, or those persons who are artificially assume a position that they're not qualified for. Anyone, Vaishyas, business people, they're all qualified to be my pure devotees. Simply, they have to understand this Bhagavad Gita. Now we should understand many of the Vedic literatures are spoken from a saintly person to a saintly person. Maitreya to Vidura, Yamaraj to Dharmaraj or to Yudhishthira. All one great saintly person to another. But Bhagavad Gita was not spoken to a great sage, although Arjuna was very saintly. But he was a family man. Arjuna was a king. He had opulence. He had power. And Bhagavad Gita spoken to him, showing that this Bhagavad Gita is for everyone. And I just want to conclude this evening's talk. I didn't get quite as far as I wanted, but what can I do? By going back to the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna shows that this is a spiritual science. It is not a particular sectarian religious view. It is a spiritual science. And he says it in one very famous verse, Dehimismin yata dehe kumaram yavanam jara. Because what Krishna is saying, that when one is put into the material body, one goes from infancy to youth to old age. And so Srila Prabhupada explained, this is a process that is going on everywhere. Not that in India people go through this and in the West they don't. Or not that in Islam they don't go through this process. But everyone is born, they grow, they exist, they die, they dwindle, and then they take another body. So Srila Prabhupada explained that what Krishna is presenting is a spiritual science which is applicable also to anyone in any religion. They can put into practice the principles of this spiritual religious process. So that is basically up to the end of the 9th chapter. Tomorrow we'll cover the rest of Bhakti, and I'll give a brief overview of the last 6 chapters. I'm sorry I couldn't get any farther, but Bhagavad Gita is unlimited transcendental knowledge, and I'm trying to explain it as thoroughly but as quickly as possible. But thoroughly and quickly don't always go well together. No? So, thank you very much for your attention this evening, and I hope to be with you, all of you, tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Shri Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Guru Prasad.
His Holiness Guru Prasad Swami Maharaj Ki. So we're inviting everyone to please stand up for the Artik ceremony.
Hare Prasad.